what comes into your mind? For a 5-year-old, not going to school is freedom. For an adult, life without hard work is freedom. For a family, not burdened by responsibilities is freedom. Flying without limitations like a bird is freedom. Wait, does freedom mean without limits? Is breaking rules freedom? Is lack of discipline freedom? Is lawlessness freedom? Living on our own terms, can we call that freedom? Is freedom lack of order? Does your freedom lead to chaos in others? Is your freedom enjoyment or enslavement? Do you really know what freedom is? What will you do with your freedom? Join us on a journey as we together redefine our true freedom to make this world a better place. Speaking to us live, Mr. Krish Danam on freedom, Dr. Sunil Chandy on healthcare, Mrs. Santa Kumari on womanhood, Mrs. Mary Alpha on womanhood, Mr. Suresh Vanguri on manhood, Mr. and Mrs. Vasant and Pranita on marriage, Mr. Bob Victors on freedom or stardom, Mr. Ben Dennis on career, Mr. Praveen Pagdala on kingdom of life, Mr. Bob Victors on doomed or redeemed, Mr. and Mrs. Bob Reggie and Sheba Dorothy in worship. Coming to you on Facebook and YouTube. God bless.
Hello everyone. Once again we welcome you all to this program of the second day called Freedom with the caption Think Within the Box. So we'll start the program with the praise of song and worship. Let us all worship our Lord with our whole hearts.
I'm this before you. And I'm lost without you. Shall we all sing? And I'm just before you. And I'm lost without you.
This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me. And I'm desperate for you. And I'm
lost without you. And I'm desperate for you. And I'm lost without you. నీవే నా ఊపిరి, నీవే నా ఊపిరి, నీ సన్నిధి, నీ సన్నిధి నాకు జీవం, నీవే జీవాహారం, నీవే జీవాహారం యేసు, నీవే జీవాహారం, నీ వాక్యం, నీ వాక్యమే నాకు జీవం, నీవే నాశ, నీవే నీవే నా కోరిక, నీవే నీవే నాశ, నీవే నీవే నా కోరిక, నీవే నాశ, నీవే. యేసయ్య నీకు వందనాలు. ఈ రాత్రికాల సమయం నీ సన్నిధిని మరొక దినం సమీపించడానికి నాయన మా జీవితాల్లో నీవు జీవాహారంగాను, నిజమైన వెలుగుగాను, నిజమైన జీవాహారంగాను నాయన మా జీవితాలను వెలిగించి మాకు జీవాన్నిచ్చి నాయన నీవు మమ్మల్ని బ్రతికింప చేస్తున్న ప్రతిదిన జీవితం కొరకు నీకు వందనాలు నాయన. నిన్ను బట్టి మేము ఉనికి కలిగి ఉన్నాం, చలిస్తున్నాం, జీవిస్తున్నాం. అందుని బట్టి హృదయపూర్వకంగా నీకు వందనాలను తెలియచేస్తూ మా జీవితాల్లో నువ్వు అనుగ్రహించిన ఈ శ్రేష్టమైన ఈ ఆరాధన సమయం అంతటిని యథార్థంగా నిన్ను ఆరాధించిన వారందరికీ నీ యొక్క ఆశీర్వాదం అనుగ్రహించండి. నీ కృప కలిగిన చేతులకు మమ్మల్ని మేము అప్పగించుకుంటాం. నీ వాక్యము మా వినికిడిలో నాయన ఆశీర్వదించబడినట్లు నీ సన్నిధి, నీ ఆత్మకార్యం మా అందరి జీవితాల్లో జరిగించి నీవే మహిమను పొందమని యేసు అతి శ్రేష్టమైన నామమున అడిగి వేడుకొనిచున్నాము తండ్రి. అందరం చెప్దాం ఆమెన్, ఆమెన్, ఆమెన్.
Hi, I am Jyothirmayi Mandla, your host for the evening. I am a dentist currently based out of Bangalore. Firstly, I would like to thank each of you on behalf of the Gospel for the New Generation team G&G, which is on a mission to equip and engage people from different walks of life to be a cause for a change and an influencer in the society that we live in. Today, I have a question for each of us here. This is something that we should ask ourselves. Is healthcare a right or a luxury? We see the Indian healthcare scenario presents a spectrum of contrasting landscapes. At one end of the spectrum are the glitzy steel and glassy structures delivering high-tech Medicare in mostly the urban parts of India. At the other end of the spectrum are the ramshackle outposts in the remote reaches of the other parts of India. As we get ready to face a future which is full of possibility and uncertainty in equal measures, it is of utmost importance that we realize the responsibility we have in delivering healthcare to every individual of our country, irrespective of all the barriers our nation has. We have with us Dr. Sunil Chandy, a renowned cardiologist who is currently the medical director at ITC Healthcare Project. He was also the former director at India's largest private teaching hospital, CMC Vellore. Dr. Chandy is an excellence in his field and is very well known as a person who knows to balance both clinical and administration skills. He believes that medicine is not a career but a calling. With an MPhil in hospital administration and an advanced leadership from the Hagai Institute, Dr. Chandy feels that he can transform the status of people who are ravaged by ill health by keeping them in the center of his attention. For the clinician Sunil Chandy, the focus is to transform the healthcare of the country so that it becomes a model for the world. For the administrator Sunil Chandy, the focus is to create India as a preferred healthcare destination of the world. And last but not the least, for the ever compassionate Sunil Chandy, the focus is to build the nation where healthcare is ethical, honest and reliable. Sir, we are privileged to have you speak to us. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon and good evening to all of you who are watching this presentation from wherever. Under the aegis of the Gospel for New Generation, it is my privilege to share a few thoughts with you on freedom. Isn't it strange that we are talking on freedom but with a lot of restraints, the restraint of not being able to see each other in person. Many years ago, singer Matt Monroe sang this song, Born Free. Listen to this word, but all creatures on this planet are wired to experience the sensation of not being bound physically, mentally, emotionally, and politically. There are many images that fleet across one's mind when the word freedom is used. Here are some of them from different stages of this and the last century. If we refer to freedom to our grandparents or people of that vintage, the image that comes to their mind is the struggle of independence. Hurling the flag in various parts of the country in their quest for freedom is what comes to their mind. To those who have experienced the Holocaust, freedom has been the urge to escape prisons and lockholes, bondage. Escaping them was what was equivalent of freedom. The World War II saw a lot of movies that came out which describe this freedom very dramatically. I'm sure some of us have seen that movie Escape from Sobibor or The Shawshank Redemption and Operation Entebbe and movies like that. To the baby boomers in 1960s, and we belong to that generation, I guess, it was all about the hippie culture, which goes those who were teenagers, it was about long hair, music, guitars, and having no care about anything in the world. To the millennials, the ones who are the workforce of this nation today, it is about surfing the World Wide Web. That's their definition of freedom. To seek what they want, whenever they want, for as long as they want. And in the process, if they miss food and sleep and personal hygiene, so be it. That's freedom for them. So let me begin by asking this question, what really is freedom then for all of us? Is there a common denominator in the word freedom? Let me ask you this question. A baby in a mother's womb, as it's shown in this picture, lives in a sealed space, legs folded on itself for about 9 months. It even has a leash which ties it to the surface of the womb. There is actually no air to breathe, no food to eat. So is it free? And mind you, when the baby by mistake attempts to exit before its scheduled time of 9 months, there's a lot of panic with the mother, with the father, with the parents, with the extended family. But when the same baby exits the womb, it cries. It is unleashed when the cord is cut, covered from head to toe with flannel or soft cloth, and handed to the mother for the next, not just few days, for the next few months and years. Is it free or is it restricted? Is worth thinking about. There's a story in the Bible of a young man who sought freedom from the regulated environment that he lived in of his own. He claimed his inheritance one day by telling his father, "I've had enough of living under restraints, I want to be free." He claimed his inheritance and walked into freedom as he defined it for himself, to a life of pleasure, to a life of prostitution, which eventually led him to abject poverty, penury, and he had to live with pigs. He felt strangely that in that freedom that he sought so badly, there was actually no freedom. And there was more joy and jubilation and freedom in the four walls of his own home. And then he walks back and his father receives him with equal amount of joy. His freedom was discovered back in the same environment that he exited from a few years ago. This picture is what is happening today in our country, in fact, all over the world. We have been living in a free nation for 72 years, free to live our own lives, seek our own destiny. But we are today facing a black swan moment. The irony of freedom is that today we are living with 100 precautions that have been placed on us by doctors and by the government. Mask over your faces, gloves on your hands, visors dropping from the forehead, distance from one another, no social gathering, no partying, no conferencing. What has happened to all the freedom? Are we asking this question? In fact, we are asking this question to ourselves and to one another. When will we be able to breathe? When can we go shopping? When can we socialize? When can we worship like we did before? When can we travel to the ends of the world? So it brings me to the next question of who gives freedom? In the light of all these historical anecdotes and present day experience, I think it's appropriate to begin by asking this question: what is freedom and who gives us this freedom? Now, I'm not going to explore this from a theological or political perspective because I don't have expertise in these areas. But I wish to speak to you from the perspective of a physician, which I have been for the last 30 odd years. The experience of seeing people unwell and sharing their woes with yourself brings you to the realization or the understanding of many bondages that they seek relief from. And that is today heavily amplified in the context of the pandemic. Remember, it's one virus in one stroke has made us all captive to various kinds of bondage. And our effort today, individually, collectively, and as a nation, is to liberate ourselves from the impact of it, not just on our bodies, but on our life itself. Not just the short-term impact, but the long-term impact. The physical, the mental, the social, and the financial impact, to give us the freedom that we enjoyed about a year ago. In my opinion, freedom is something that is a God-given value. It's a God-given gift. And I reckon that He is the designer, the steward, the resource, the redeemer of freedom. the ultimate giver of freedom. And I say this because, as you see in this picture, which is the Garden of Eden, freedom was God's idea. The design thinking of the Garden of Eden was flavored with freedom right from the creation of man, because God made man in his own image, bestowing faculties of intellect, hand skills, senses, sensations, and choice. Why? He did something for us, human beings. He wanted to set us free as free moral agents. He gave Adam the privilege of nomenclature of the entire creation. He brought animals to Adam and said, "You name this animal." He put every plant and animal as a source of food. God made Adam and Eve the bosses of all his creation. And then he withdraws into his heavenly chamber. He bestowed on them freedom to name everything, to eat from every tree, and exert free moral choices. And the rest is history. We will come back to that, but there was a catch. A few thousand years later, we see in the history of God's people, the Israelites were in terrible bondage, suffering under the tyranny of Pharaoh. God suffered with them. God wanted to set them free. So it was actually his idea to set the Israelites free. It was not Moses' idea. And if we read those chapters, we'll realize that Moses never initiated. Moses never volunteered. Moses made excuses to get away from this responsibility. So God appears in the burning bush. He draws up the plan. When Moses made excuses, he augmented his capacity by providing him with Aaron. He empowered both of them with divine powers. He took the initiative, total initiative. And he labored with them in Egypt for 40 long years. Why? Because God valued freedom for them. The history will tell us that there were 10 plagues. He split the Red Sea. He carried them home through different kinds of experiences. The freedom trail through this journey was speckled with ups and downs, disappointments, complaints, rebellion. But he persevered. And the message to us is that we have a God who is committed to our freedom as a very important value addition for his people. And then, to cut the long story short, we find that ultimately, when he finds that nothing that he has done has given them a redemption of sorts, many kinds, we find that God intervenes in the restoration of man's freedom by this ultimate sacrifice of giving his own son on behalf of all of us. This was a turning point in history, and I think this is the final point where God gives us that value of freedom. God gives us the choice of freedom that we need to make. In fact, the entire life of Jesus, the 33 years that he was on this earth, he embarked on various things that gave man freedom from a physical point of view, from a mental point of view. And if you look at all his miracles and his ministry, it was all about the truth that we must seek, and the truth that would set us free. So if we talk about freedom, there are also, by logic, certain bondages. Throughout the Old Testament, we read about God intervening at various points in time in his effort to restore freedom to man. Several interventions notwithstanding, he finally came down onto this earth as the Redeemer of freedom by giving his own beloved Son, Jesus Christ, in exchange for our sins and infirmities so that we could have freedom. When we talk about freedom, obviously by logic it means that there are several kinds of bondages, and it's important to identify what these bondages are. There are three, maybe four kinds of bondages, but we'll deal with just three of them. There are personal bondages, there are relational bondages, and there are circumstantial bondages that affect all of us at some point or the other in our lives. Personal bondages are many, and it's good for young people to know this and have an insight into how to deal with them. Personal bondages such as addictions, it may be a substance abuse, alcohol, smoke, smokable drugs, addictions to virtuality, and there's plenty nowadays, conceptual addictions. There are several behavioral strongholds like gossiping and backbiting, and in fact even being a workaholic is a kind of addiction. There are addictions that generate out of habits, pornography, and nowadays internet surfing, to a point that we just cannot spend a few minutes without it. It's good to know that if the last thing you do at the end of the day and the first thing that you do at the beginning of the day is to reach out for your cell phone, you may be addicted. Gaming is an addiction. In fact, even eating is an addiction. Psychosomatic illnesses which are bound to now escalate after this pandemic because of fear psychosis, panic, worry about what will happen if I get a cold, what happens if somebody sneezes in the vicinity, are all kinds of fear psychosis that we will have to live with, which will shackle us down, not giving us the freedom that we enjoyed before. I want to tell you a story about which is written in European history by an author called Thomas Costain, and it's about the story of a 14th century duke whose name was Reynold, who was overthrown by his younger brother Edward. So what Edward did was to build a castle and give Reynold a room in the castle, and told him that you can get out of the castle through the doors and windows that I have made for you. The trick was this: Reynold was, as you can see in this picture, extremely fat. Okay, and it would not have been easy for him to get out of the room without actually having, lost some weight. And in order to prevent that, Edward, the brother, gave him lots of delicious food so that he would not lose weight. And as the old story would have it, he was there for 10 years as a prisoner of his own appetite, unable to get out of the castle, till Edward died and he was released, not to live very long after that. Just a story just to highlight the emphasis, highlight the reality that even overeating can be something that can imprison us. There are relational bondages like intimacy, illegitimacy, abuse, either as a victim or as an abuser, and lots of inheritance issues that surround real estate and property that could make us victims of bondage and may tie us down to situations that we cannot escape from. There are circumstantial bondages such as financial bondages that may come out of family feuds. There are physical bondages that relate to illness, and there are plenty of them. Some of them we cannot help, some of them are acquired, but these are all bondages anyway. There are legal bondages, a long court case that ties us down financially and socially, which can go on for years and years and years without giving us that sense of liberation from the problem that we face. It's important to understand that there is a paradox to freedom. We all think that freedom is like the picture that I showed at the beginning. It's like the birds where you are free to fly with total abandon. But that's not the case in real life. Freedom is never absolute, never 100%. There are lots of do-nots for freedom, which is what we often tend to ignore or forget. And the reason for that is these three examples. If you can see in this picture, the rails, a rail carriage which is not on a rail is actually free in one sense, but it doesn't help because the rail has to be on the rail to seek its destination. And so is the case for a ship. A ship without a rudder is not a ship at all. It cannot move, it cannot navigate, and it might just be stuck on water. And so is the case with a violin string or a guitar string. A violin string is free. You can give a kink at its end and just leave it on the table. It will not do its job. But it becomes functional and productive when it is wound on to the body of the violin and made taut and tuned and tightened and tethered. It's only then that it begins to make the fine music which all of us enjoy. So therefore freedom has got several paradoxes which we need to think about. One is that freedom is not free either. Freedom is not free because somebody pays a price at some time for freedom. We just told you about the redemptive act of God where God paid a heavy price for your and my freedom. There's a story about two people bidding for a slave girl in the US. One was a bad man, the other one was a good man. And they were bidding for this slave girl. The bad man bid an amount, the good man beat him to it. The bad man escalated the bid. The good man offered a higher price. It went on for some time and finally the bad man gave up and the slave girl became the bought property of this good man, the gentleman. But the girl refused to go with him. And when she told him that she is not going to come with him, this is what he said. He said, "Little girl, you do not have to come with me because I have paid the price for your freedom. It's not for you to come with me, but it's for you to go because your price has been paid." Freedom comes with responsibility. Number 3. All those who bought the War of Indian Freedom had a responsibility to build the country from scratch in 1947. And the initial years would have been hard building this nation up from the wreckage of bondage to a liberated state. Setting up systems, finding people as leaders would have been a hard job, but it came with that responsibility. Freedom, finally, is not the right to do what you desire, but freedom is the desire to do what is right, and it's important for us to realize that. There are certain prerequisites for freedom. One is that freedom and truth are interlinked. You cannot have freedom if you don't have truth. You need knowledge. You need a well-being of your mind and your body. If you're shackled with diseases that are incurable, you may not have freedom in one sense of the word. And finally, you need to have courage. Reality check, which is associated with truth. There is a program on one national television called Reality Check. Today we live in an age when news has to be cross-checked for its authenticity. Let me repeat that. News, which is just reporting of events as they occur, is today not reliable. It has to be cross-checked, and that's called a reality check. What a tragedy. In this show, people go into the front lines and ensure that what they are reporting, the true version of truth is reported. Fake news is an entity, and we are all warned against fake news. Photoshopping, friends, is a way by which you make the not so good look better, the ugly look good, the better be made to look the best. Lack of authenticity. But absolute truth is absolute. And it's only when you seek the truth will make you free. And this is what Jesus said in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 8, verse 32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. One of the problems that we face, we don't know whether what we hear about the COVID data is true or not. People are getting infected, but there is no community transmission as it's reported. Can we believe it? We do not know. But it's truth that will prevent us from denial, and it is the truth that will set us free. Knowledge. I want to emphasize on that verse again, the second, third, and the fourth word, and ye shall know the truth. It's not that the truth must be there, but you have to know the truth, which means insight, knowledge, understanding, research. God wants us to be knowledgeable, wise, and insightful. And the deciphering of truth from non-truth is possible only with knowledge. And this is probably the reason why education is so important. Education and health was given a lot of importance by the early Christian church. Well-being. Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 4 verse 23 that he went around healing every disease and sickness. We need to steward the God-given gift of our bodies, our physical status, as much as possible. We need to be a healthy people to enjoy the freedom that he has promised, he has given. So freedom actually prevents us from those indulgences of our body which may potentially harm us: smoking, drinking, drugs, food, overeating, because your body is a temple of God, and we need to steward that, nurture it, and nurturing our bodies is part of the quest for freedom. Having said this, let us just briefly, and at the end, look at what are the future challenges to freedom. There are 4 in my opinion. The first is this growing trend of an artificial intelligence, the over-dependence on machines, because I believe freedom is an essentially human thing. It is intangible, it's abstract, but it's intensely experiential. The future of human existence is being increasingly wired to machines and systems and software and technology. In doing so, without realizing, we are becoming captive. We will become increasingly captive to machine dominance. There may come a day when robots decide for us. No freedom. Today, it's possible to manage your home sitting at a distance using Google Home or a software. We can do that sitting at any part in the world, but realize that so can anyone who can hack into your account. There's also a certain freedom that comes with faith, and I've alluded to that. But there's a slight difference between faith and religion. It is Jesus who said that we will worship in spirit and in truth, and not at the mountains. So it is truth that will lead us to that freedom to worship in our faith. There are also trends, and I don't need to go into that. There are lots of trends that seem to be very attractive to the new generation. This is a gospel for new generation. But as God had done right at the beginning, at the creation of the world itself, that He made us free moral agents. And it's important that we do so by exerting our choices, by using our desire to do the right thing, and that is the definition of freedom. Finally, friends, to end, freedom is not about hurling flags or high-sounding rhetoric, but about freedom unrestrained to do the right thing and restrained to do the wrong. By choice, not by coercion, for ourselves and for others. God bless you and thank you.
Healthcare, the most important of all sectors. While we cannot live without it, we certainly cannot live with it.
Being in a healthcare sector, it's a very noble profession.
No doubt, India has one of the best doctors in the world.
Anything from around the world can be done in India.
When we talk about COVID, I am very proud and grateful for our country's comeback to it, because with a population like India, we have the recovery rates that are more than 67%. So
I would like to thank all the healthcare workers who have been working in this pandemic,
because they have a commendable job history in this pandemic, and they have just strived to make it a better place for us to live in.
There are many challenges which India is facing. The first one is awareness. Most of the people are not aware of their own health, and also the schemes provided by the government. Many people are not able to reach the schemes which are provided by the government of the healthcare. And also, most important is money. Like many people could not afford the treatment, money for the treatment. Very poor literacy, no proper education, and also less priority of health in the population comparatively to others.
We lack a lot of doctors in comparison to the population of India.
Services rendered are mostly patient-oriented and care-oriented than money, but there are certain institutions think otherwise.
While the rich enjoy the modern technologies in hospitals, the poor people in India cannot even afford the simple tests.
unequal distribution of healthcare has been a major stumbling block.
The problem arises with these private sector organizations where it is portrayed to be a corporate money-making strategy rather than giving proper treatment and diagnosis to the people.
Access of healthcare is significantly urban biased, and rural residents face disproportionately larger share in unhealthy population.
So I would like to shed some light into the cutoff of most of the private hospitals. For meetings that can be held for the betterment of quality treatment, they have frequent sale review meetings. How many private beds? How many shared beds? Have you talked to the mothers into having a C-section? Have you scared the patient enough by using big terms he does not know the meaning to, and talked him into a surgery? They get a commission for all admissions. They ask patients to do tests. They withdraw blood and their money, only to discard them into the basin. This is called as the basin test. They manipulate the results, so you would buy a certain medicine, and they get their commission either way. So we turn to public hospitals, but most of us think otherwise because of the poor conditions. Most states in India don't spend much money on improving the healthcare facilities. India spends only 1.29% GDP on healthcare.
I think the government can be more involved and concentrate on giving proper treatment and diagnosis to its patients.
So hence we can improve our healthcare by encouraging new talent and also spending more on medical researches and international collaboration and educating people, which is very important.
If that doctor count grows, there would be a very good distribution of patients, and the work efficiency and the treatment care, everything that also goes up accordingly.
And when we focus on care-oriented part, where people who are financially unstable to take care of their health are provided with services and care that is up to date and satisfactory and for free of cost. So that's something really nice.
So this one thing I think would help our health system would be introducing a counseling session for the workers in it, because at the end of the day, if they are fine, we are fine too. So I think it's time we start taking care of it.
Developing health IT will aid in the quality of healthcare delivery.
The digitalization of the patient's records. By this, the diagnosis and the treatment can become more easier and more efficient.
The conditions can be changed slowly but surely. As Sonia Sotomayor said, we must not fight the system, but we must fix it.
We are doing something good.
So, but we can make a change ourselves, giving the best service to the people who comes in contact to us. Change starts from ourselves.
Make our country a better place to live in, and it's a duty and it's a privilege to give service to a nation.
We're going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That was an inspiring video that we just saw, and it's so glad to hear from young minds about bringing changes in the healthcare, and also regarding what Dr. Chandy just spoke about. He really gave us an insight into what our current situation is, especially during this pandemic, where all of us are, looking to get free from this virus, or we're all just waiting when will we get back the freedom that we had a year ago. So, sir, thank you for for an amazing message that you just gave us. Before we move on into the question and answer session, I would like to tell the viewers, if you have any questions, you can just let us know in the comment section below. So, yeah, question for you. You were just talking about personal contagions. You spoke about psychosomatic disorders, or the eating disorders.
There's sorry to interrupt. There's a bit of an echo. I think your voice is reflecting back, and
I'll do it. Maybe we can YouTube video. No. Yeah, I think someone is playing the YouTube. There's a lot of background music noise in some kids.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank you for this very informative message that you just gave us, Doctor. I like the
Thank
part
you.
where you were telling us, we are all waiting to get rid of this virus and we just want back that freedom that we just had a year ago. So, yeah, this is something very, something that we all have to think about and what each of us have a role in this pandemic. So, having said that, we have a question and answer session. So, I would like to ask you regarding the personal bondages that you were just talking about, especially the
Yes.
part where you said, the gossips or workaholism. I'm sure all of us fall prey to this, and it could definitely affect our mental health. So, is there, could you give us a suggestion on how we could overcome such mental bondages or, in ways that this gossips wouldn't impact our mental health?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a very generic question. The fact of life is that anything which is done in excess, even if it's a good thing, becomes an addiction. What is an addiction? An addiction is the habitual use or abuse of anything. It can be a substance, it can be an attitude, it can be a relationship, to a level of excess where other things become distractions. Your lifestyle tends to get ignored. We look at that as a common factor in all kinds of addictions. So, smoking and alcohol, it's easy to understand. Anybody knows that, if you smoke heavily or you drink excess alcohol, it tends to become addictive. But there are bigger addictions, there are addictions to, let us say, somebody who's addicted to lying, what happens? All of us say lies as children. We have said small lies, big lies. There's not a single human being who can claim that he's not never said a lie. But there are habitual liars or who survive on lies. That's an addiction because you take it to a different level of its excessive usage. So workaholism is also that state of someone's existence where work becomes so compulsive, so obsessive, that you tend to ignore many other things that form part of a good, your own spiritual freedom, your family, your personal health. So when you begin to work, like an engine, ignoring all these things because that drives you, it becomes an addiction and it doesn't help you, nor does it help the other people. So in the list that I showed, very few things I've showed, but just like alcohol is excess of alcohol, workaholism is excess of work. Or the other way around, where you don't do any work at all and, you just keep playing games or, you play cards all the time or you get into music, and unless it's a professional thing, you spend all your time and energy into that. So that becomes an addiction. So what happens with all these type of behaviors is that, life has, we all believe as God conceptualized it, whether it's in the Garden of Eden or even modern life, is a happy balance of many things. It's a balance of stewardship of your personal being, which means health, your mental status, your relationships, your work, your free time, your worship, your prayer, and everything else. That's what makes life complete. If there is an imbalance in anything in one, it becomes a problem. And it's important to understand this because I'm sure that these sessions are being watched by lots of young people for whom this has become a lifestyle. The dependence on internet, the dependence on gaming, the dependence on downloading. Downloading is a big addiction because you keep on downloading movies and GIFs without knowing what for. If you don't allow download a particular night, life is very miserable and you start getting withdrawal symptoms because you haven't done it. But it's purposeless. There's no purpose if you ask them why they're doing so. So it is in order to live the balanced life that God has intended for each of us. It is necessary to have an insight into this. That where do we call it stop? Where do we end something which is good when it is taken in moderate amount? Eating, for example, food. I gave an example and a story. Food is essential for life. But if you overeat food, it becomes a cause of ill health. Water, is necessary. Without water, you cannot live. But if you overdrink water, and there is a disease where you keep on drinking water all the time, your body will swell up and you can have all kinds of, salt imbalances in the body and you could land up with major trouble. So that is the basic principle of addiction. Anything done to an extreme, let me tell you, even spirituality to an extreme, is out of focus. We have to, our spirituality, I believe, is meant for us to live on this earth so that we can be of tremendous impact to ourselves and to the neighborhood that we live in, to the surrounding of people that we live in. And therefore, it is important that we strike a balance between, as God said, you are to live, you are not to be of the world, but in the world. Okay? And understanding of this addiction helps you to decide what in what quantity is good for you. There are some things that cannot be accepted at all. Non-truth, lying, murder, all this is zero. Okay? But many other things that God fixed into our system has to be balanced. You see, God gave us that freedom in the Garden of Eden. Everything that you see is at your command. Everything that you see in front of you is for you to eat except one tree or two trees. Okay? So there are checks and balances and there are restrictions which we have to know. And there is a restriction not only of quality but also of quantity. And that's what we need to understand, when we talk about addiction from the perspective that you have just highlighted. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir.
I think it's muted. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir. That
Bob,
was
your mic is muted.
great answer. Yes, sir. That was a great answer that you just gave us. Uh, Let me ask you, take you into the current scenario that we are in. Healthcare doesn't just start with good medical system or getting the medical insurance, but it's right from a kitchen to the food we eat. While it is easy to blame people for the food choices, we should know that the truth is different. So these days, there are a lot of issues with the availability, awareness, and the affordability from the food that we eat. And also options have become more costlier, and then people are getting flooded with confusing options because of the corporate companies that are giving us healthy food in disguise. So, based on this current scenario, I would like to ask you, where have we failed that we have come to such a situation, and how do we overcome this?
Okay. So that's also a very sensible question, and this is something that confuses the young mind. So if you look at the history of, let's look at it from a biblical perspective. Let's look at the Garden of Eden, where it all started, where God made a very exquisite panoramic environment, a milieu for Adam and Eve and for all his children and grandchildren, the whole world to live in. And what did he say? He put a whole host of plants and vegetation and animals and gave them full freedom for them to eat. Okay? So that it was for them to identify which are the ones to be taken in what quantity, and I'm sure they did that. So if you look at it from a very generic perspective, it is not that some things are good for health and some things are bad for health. Okay, and you bring it to the modern times, like there is a belief that if you take, a lot of red meat, it will give you heart attacks. A part of that statement is true, but today, as you can see from the literature that is circulating in the world, people have gone back to now fat diet, saying that, it's not true anymore. It is now the carbohydrates that are at fault. So, the world understanding, this human understanding keeps on waxing and waning. And I must say this, that a lot of it is controlled and regulated by commercial interests. So many years ago, when there was a lack of good milk for children in India, I'm talking about many decades ago. Today there's a milk revolution. There's no dearth of milk. The scenario has changed, but that is what promoted the companies to make packaged baby food. I don't want to take any names, but milk powder that got to be imported from the United States because the cow's milk was blamed for this kind of thing and the other. The cereals that came in for children, they all substitutes for certain kinds of deficiencies that were over exaggerated so that business could go on. Likewise, now you look at the COVID environment today, because we do not have access to natural food because the markets are shut down, there's no supply, the supply chain is affected, so you don't get fresh vegetables. You're worried about whether you should buy it from the market because of the COVID hype. So, what people have done, there has been an increase in packaged food consumption. So it is good business, making hay while the sun shines. Of course, the standards of hygiene and sanitation today are very good. They are controlled with a lot of regulations from the government, but they are expensive and certainly not accessible to the common man, the villager, the man who is in the remote areas will not be able to access them. But it's not true. It is not a good thing for him to believe that only what I get in Tetra Pak food is good. That's not true. The best food is natural food in any form. Raw vegetables, fruits, and all the other non-vegetarian products that are available, cooked in the right way and taken in the right quantity is a healthy diet. Today, you look at the diet revolution. Today, there's an emphasis that we must reduce the amount of starchy food, which is rice and carbohydrates, and actually increase our protein intake and even fat intake. You know that today eggs are allowed as a healthy source of proteins. 10 years ago, it was different. The Time magazine had put two boiled eggs as the reason for heart disease. Today, they have taken that off from the rogue list of food that people can eat. So these are all the undulations of business interests and the changing times that come on food. But if you ask a simple question, what should I eat? To a young man of 15 or 17, 18 years, eat everything, but in the right quantity. You must know what a breakfast does, what lunch does, and what dinner does. Most of us, at least in India, do not understand that the driving meal of an active person is what? The driving meal of an active person in India or anywhere in the world is what? It's not lunch, it's not dinner, it's breakfast. Because that is breaking your fast. You've not had any food for 8 hours at least. Your stomach is empty. Within 1 hour, you will be on the public transport going to your office or going to college or going for a very active lifestyle. And therefore, that is the fuel that you have filled in. So it has to have a good quantity of protein, which is the bodybuilding component of food. You need to have good amount of carbohydrates, which is the active fuel that will quickly burn and release energy. You need to have fluids in terms of plain water. or maybe a glass of fresh fruit juice. You need to have fruits, which will give you all the minerals. You need to have some milk, which is God's source of protein. You can have an egg, which will again give you protein and all the other things in the right quantity. A fully packed meal is breakfast. Lunch, which is in the middle of the day, must be light. It is not the 5 layered lunch that we often have at office, taking tiffin carriers. Not necessary, because we are working, we are burning energy, and all we need is a snack, which is a sandwich, a glass of juice, and a fruit. And then you have a light snack in the evening, and then a relaxed dinner. The dinner is the high quality meal, which is early, not at 10 o'clock. It should be between 7 and 8, because you have to give some time for the food to move down before you lie down flat. Okay, and it should be the enjoyed meal where you're sitting with your loved ones, your family, and it is not hurried because you don't have to go anywhere, and you enjoy that meal in fellowship and company. So, there are different aspects of food that makes it wholesome. It's not just what you eat. It's the right kind of balance. Okay. So let nobody tell you that vegetarian food is excellent and non-veg is bad. Let nobody tell you that non-veg is excellent and vegetarian is bad. That's not true. These are all God-given things for consumption, and we need to understand how to package it in the right quantity at the right time for the right kind of activity that we are involved in. An elderly man will need a different mix. A young person will need a different mix. A young child will need a completely different mix of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And this is what people will learn as they grow up in their years. Back to you.
Yes, thank you so much. That was filled with so much of information because right now in the situation, because of the COVID-19, people are thinking that because of eating non-veg you get the virus, and so they are more of like eat more of vegetarian food and then avoid the non-vegetarian. So, sir, you have given us a diet with so much of balance that we should put in with. Going on with our next question. Uh, so the question goes like, coming to the mental barriers and limitations, most of our fears and apprehensions are sourced from the people we are surrounded with, either the family or the friends or the news and the social media. So in the current scenario of the COVID-19, how do we filter out the good from the bad?
Yeah, so this is something that I covered briefly in my talk as to it has become extremely difficult to decipher what we hear is true or not true. Okay, that has been rapidly augmented by this easy source of media, which is called social media. Just a back, somebody sent us a video of an army officer singing on stage, and it was forwarded as the pilot who died in the crash. That this is the person singing in it. It just went all over the place. You just look at the emotional impact that video had. But it turned out it was a totally different person who looked very similar. So you see, we also tend to get convinced because we believe that social media has that power of, hallucination. But today, unfortunately, it is true. It has become very difficult to believe what is true and what is not true. So, the way I would look at it is, in this day and age when there's so much of information that is easily available on the net, on social media. Finally, you will have to filter it through three things: your common sense, your sense of logic, and your intuition. Okay. So anything you hear, you have to start by asking this question: can I believe this? Because we are living in a world of sensation. We like sensation. The more sensational the news, the more receptive we become to it. You look at all the TV channels, the kind of sensationalism that they practice by bringing in people with very strong opinions, and you sitting strongly truth, very strongly 10 times it becomes a truth. That's the reality. So finally, the only filter I can suggest is that you have to process it in your mind and say, now I've heard this, is it true? Shall I just wait and confirm this? So anything that is repeatedly coming, in one form is likely to be true. But if there is a contradiction or a variation of what you hear between one version and the other, you must be on guard to see whether that is correct or not. So this is the bane of social media. In fact, not only social media, even the regular news media, it has become very difficult to believe what is right or wrong. So it actually shackles our mind. It does not give us that freedom to act on something. Because the next day there will be a denial of that. The next time there will be a correction in the same newspaper. And then, you move on to the next sensation. So, we are living in these difficult times, and that is why it becomes difficult. It becomes very important to fall back on your conscience, fall back on the values, fall back on the standards that you have set for yourself. That's where your faith comes in. You see, each one's faith. I'm not saying that it is just one faith, but each one's faith becomes the benchmark or the yardstick against which you judge and decide what you heard is believable or not. Okay. So that's my very general answer. There's a laboratory test to put a news through and say, yeah, this is believable or not, because these are very abstract things. So we have to fall back on conscience, common sense, and faith to digest and say, yeah, I believe this because this fits in. And truth always triumphs. If you hear something which is turning out to be true in actual terms, then you know where the truth is. You look at the COVID data, for example. When we started off, we were told it is going to last for 21 days. We believed it. But today it is more than 4 months. So we know where the truth is. You see, likewise about the vaccine, we heard it is going to come out in September, but we believed it, even as medical people. It was hope more than belief. But today we know that that is not the truth. So how do we judge this? It's very difficult. So you have to go by your gut feeling, the intuition, which again is a very God-given, system within you. You sometimes act on your that turns out to be true. Okay, and that is also, I believe, part of God's way of incorporating something in the human DNA that tells you a gut feeling that you take a decision on that, and invariably it turns out to be true.
Totally agree to that. Um, Moving on to our next question. Since you spoke about man versus machines, okay, just
Be quiet. No.
hold on. I'm just okay. Since you spoke about man versus machines on artificial intelligence topic, we want to know your view on AI or machine learning in the healthcare. I mean, does AI really suffice the gap in healthcare?
Actually, I mean, if you ask, let me first address this from collective of the trend of the world. There's a lot of hype about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence has actually made a significant foray into healthcare even before COVID. And the COVID crisis has actually used as a platform to enhance the role of within inverted commas experimental modality of new intelligence that is going to capture medicine. In fact, there are big books written by very famous people like Eric Topol and Deep Medicine and books like that, which actually talks about the revolution which is coming our way in terms of the health, in terms of healthcare delivery and new options for treatment, etc. But let me now talk about is my personal belief, and I know most people will not agree with me. If you ask this one question, and I have asked this question to myself, I have not seen artificial intelligence do anything significant in the COVID environment, because it is a public health issue which has generated tons and tons of data all over the world. And if artificial intelligence was something that could create magic out of data, it has not done so in the COVID environment. We have not been benefited, in my opinion, I may be wrong. In my opinion, in my very limited knowledge of technology, I have not seen anything tangible that has come out of a significant contribution of digital or artificial intelligence in the COVID environment. Okay, and I believe I'm not surprised, because there's a difference between when we talk about health as a service, between healthcare
Alafana?
as a scientific.
ఏం క్వశ్చన్ అడగాలి అదేనా కార్పొరేట్ అండ్ ప్రైవేట్ హాస్పిటల్
నిన్నకు రెస్పాండ్ అవుదాం.
Okay, can you hear? Okay.
Yes sir, we can hear you.
So I personally believe that I personally believe that it is a little too early to celebrate the intelligence in healthcare. Maybe it will turn out to be very good, but I have not seen any indication of that. And the COVID crisis has actually created a lot of turbulence, which is like a reset button. A lot of things in healthcare are going to be reset. I personally believe that healthcare is completely different from rocket science or manufacturing technology, because health is actually about dealing with the human person. There's a lot of emotion in healthcare. A patient is a person who is a baggage of not only physical, mental, emotional, social, and financial difficulties when he approaches a doctor. I don't think artificial intelligence has got that capacity to deal with you, okay, not as data set, but as a human being. You may have fever, but you may also have tremendous amount of mental anxiety which comes from other reasons. And you actually go and seek the help of a doctor from that perspective. You see a doctor who's a stranger and you open your heart out with all the confidential information, because there's an element of trust. I don't see artificial intelligence filling that gap, where trust is the stepping stone where you get into the doctor's chamber. And in the delivery of healthcare, it is not the machine popping a tablet into your mouth, but there's a lot of tenderness and compassion and empathy and love, which is part and parcel of healthcare delivery. I don't see artificial intelligence filling that gap. It is going to compete with that. And people are now saying that it is not necessary to have empathy and compassion in healthcare. I completely disagree. I'm talking from my faith perspective, and I believe healthcare is an entity which is very intricately interwoven with human emotion. It is an emotional entity. And if you look at the aggregate of all the patients who are affected with COVID today, that's a very strong reality. And artificial intelligence has done nothing, as far as we know, in terms of handling the human crisis, the humane crisis of COVID. Maybe a lot of research papers will come out of it. Maybe the vaccine will come because of artificial intelligence. But all the emotional factors are not going to be covered. No, but that's my personal opinion, and I may be debated to be completely wrong, and I accept that.
Totally agree, sir. Definitely the machines can't replicate the human emotions. And it's only us humans, who can give that selfless sacrifice or the love and the care that we usually give our patients. And definitely, machines can't do this. We have a next question for Bob Aleph. Anna, how do we balance worldly knowledge, which includes scientific knowledge and what is socially expected, with scriptural standards and knowledge when we make decisions? అంటే ఇప్పుడు వరల్డ్లీ నాలెడ్జ్ ని స్క్రిప్చురల్ నాలెడ్జ్ తో ఎలా బ్యాలెన్స్ చేయగలుగుతాము అని మన వ్యూవర్స్ అడుగుతున్నారు. సో మీ ఒపీనియన్ ఏంటి
Worldly
దీనిపైన?
knowledge. Before that, I just want to thank Dr. Chandy for accepting your invitation. Thank you so much, sir. I got blessed with your talk.
Very much.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
along with the PowerPoint. Yeah, there is a power in your point. Yeah, now it's my turn. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So many of our audience are from Telugu, and I want to speak in Telugu.
Okay. Sure.
So, yeah, ఇప్పుడు నువ్వు చెప్పు నీ క్వశ్చన్ మళ్ళీ ఒకసారి ఇట్స్ నా ఆడియో.
ఓకే, మన వరల్డ్లీ నాలెడ్జ్ ని స్క్రిప్చురల్ నాలెడ్జ్ లేకపోతే స్క్రిప్చురల్ స్టాండర్డ్స్ తో ఎలా బ్యాలెన్స్ చేయగలుగుతాము, లేకపోతే స్క్రిప్చురల్ నాలెడ్జ్ తో డెసిషన్స్ ఎలా తీసుకోగలుగుతాము?
యా, ఇది ఒక మంచి పాయింట్. ఇది నేను తెలుగు ఆడియన్స్ ఎవరైతే మిస్ అవుతున్నారో నేను వాళ్ళకి చెప్తా ఉన్నాను. సో మ్యాన్ కి నాలెడ్జ్ ఎట్లా వచ్చింది అంటే, మ్యాన్ వాస్ క్రియేటెడ్ ఇన్ ది ఇమేజ్ ఆఫ్ గాడ్. మనిషిని దేవుడు తన పోలికలో చేశాడు. సో కొలెషన్స్ 3rd chapter 10th verse లో ఉన్న మాట ఏంటంటే, ద నాలెడ్జ్ ఇస్ గాడ్స్ ఇమేజ్ అని అంటారు. సో దేవుడు రేషనల్ బీయింగ్ గా తయారు చేశాడు హ్యూమన్. కాబట్టి దేవుడు హ్యూమన్ ని రేషనల్ బీయింగ్ గా తయారు చేసి ఈ ఎర్త్ నుంచి దీన్ని డెవలప్ చేయమని అడిగాడు. దీన్ని మీరు ఫలించాలి, అభివృద్ధి పరచాలి, ఈ భూమిని నిండించి అభివృద్ధి పరచమన్నాడు. సో దేవుడు మనకి ఒక హోల్ యూనివర్స్ ని ఇచ్చాడు, హ్యూమన్ కి ఇచ్చాడు. హ్యూమన్ ఇస్ అ గాడ్స్ ఇమేజ్. అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ హ్యూమన్ ఇస్ అ రేషనల్ బీయింగ్. సో ఆ రేషనాలిటీని నువ్వు యూజ్ చేసుకోమని దేవుడు కోరుకున్నాడు. సో ఆ రేషనాలిటీని యూజ్ చేసి తీసుకొస్తున్నప్పుడు టెక్నాలజీ వస్తుంది. అట్ ద సేమ్ టైం టెక్నాలజీ యొక్క అల్టిమేట్ అవుట్కమ్ ఏంటి? సో పర్సన్ లేకపోతే టెక్నాలజీ ఎందుకు? సో ఆల్ బీటెక్ ఎంటెక్ స్టూడెంట్స్ నేను చెప్తున్న మాట అంటే, మీ టెక్నాలజీ ఉంది, మీ టెక్నాలజీ ఒకవేళ హ్యూమన్ లేకపోతే టెక్నాలజీ వల్ల యూజ్ ఏంటి? ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ ఇంటెలిజెన్స్ వల్ల యూజ్ ఏంటి? సో అట్ ద ఎండ్ ఆఫ్ ద ప్రోగ్రామ్ లేదా ఎండ్ ఆఫ్ ద అవుట్కమ్ ఏంటంటే, టెక్నాలజీకి అవుట్కమ్ ఏంటంటే హ్యూమన్ కి సర్వీస్ ఇవ్వడం. సో అందుకని మన టెక్నాలజీని ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేస్తున్నప్పుడు, లేకపోతే ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ ఇంటెలిజెన్స్ అని మనం మాట్లాడుతున్నప్పుడు, ఏఐ అని మాట్లాడుతున్నప్పుడు, హ్యూమన్ ప్లేస్ ని ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ ఇంటెలిజెన్స్ ఎప్పటికీ తీసుకోలేదు. సో అది సినిమా వరకు అయితే ఇట్స్ ఓకే, కానీ రియల్ లైఫ్ లో ఇట్ ఇస్ ఇంపాసిబుల్. ఎందుకంటే యాజ్ డాక్టర్ చాండీ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేసినట్టు మనకి ఏమన్నారంటే, హ్యూమన్ కి మాత్రమే ఫీలింగ్స్ ఉంటాయి, హ్యూమన్ మాత్రమే లవ్ ని ఎక్స్ప్రెస్ చేసే ఇది ఉంటుంది, ఎమోషన్స్, కంపాషన్. సో వేరే ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ ఇంటెలిజెన్స్ కి అవేమీ లేవు అని.
థ్యాంక్ యూ అన్న, మంచి ఆన్సర్ ఇచ్చినందుకు ఆ క్వశ్చన్ కి. We have the next question, Dr. Chandy. So this question is for you. A lot of people are in mental negativity leading to depression nowadays, and it's so painful to watch them suffer in their own mind so much. How do we help people like them?
Yeah, so I say that I'm not saying I'm a counselor, but let me just speak from a general medical understanding and just observation of many people who've gone through experiences. What causes depression? There are many things that may cause depression, but again, it is actually very similar to what we described when we were discussing addiction. When an emotion is carried to an excess, something that everybody is exposed to. For example, failure. Some people will get over it and move on to the next, but some people will take that failure into them and keep on thinking about it and feel very negative about it without finding solutions. So, in one sense, they become obsessed. Their mind is full of that worry, anxiety that builds on it. And finally, you reach a stage of hopelessness where they feel that life is not worth it. It's not worth trying again. It is not worth talking about it to anybody else, and they go into that form of negativity. Okay, different people are made in different ways. Some are very strong, some they just ignore it and move along, but some people are sensitive enough to take that in and weep over it, or ruminate about it for a long period of time, and then they become in a way addicted to that. Okay, so and then it forms, it manifests, it kind of expresses itself as negativity or depression. For example, let us just take the COVID environment. Let me give you a very simple example. All of us have traveled in a bus or in a train where you sit next to, on the left side, on the right side, there is somebody sitting, a stranger, and they sneeze or cough. What was our reaction till now? Nothing. Yeah, somebody sneezes, somebody coughs, we may have breathed in, but we would just move on. But imagine now, once the buses start flying again, and you are sitting in the bus going to office, and somebody on the right side sneezes. Is there an anxiety? Definitely. Because this has become so pervasive that, oh, he sneezed, maybe he's going to transmit some virus, maybe it may not be COVID, but some virus. So it has completely changed our behavior, where we now become very worried about it. So what will you do? You will get out, and maybe 3 days later, you might want to go and tell the doctor about it, that somebody sneezed in the bus that I was traveling, and he looked unwell. Maybe should I do a COVID test? Please do a COVID test for me, or please check me out. It is going to change our behavior. Okay, so like that, I'm giving you a very simple example because it's easy to understand, because we're living in the COVID times. Like that, there are many behaviors that affect us. So the best way to deal with this is, again, to have a very balanced form of life. I believe, if we do many things, which form our different parts of life in equal measure, okay, work, rest at home, relationships, faith, spirituality, vacationing, hobbies, which you can choose from, and have bits and pieces of all these things forming one entire life, you'll be less prone to depression. Eating the right thing, having social life, interacting with others. It is when there is an imbalance that you get into different kinds of problems. So if there is an imbalance where you begin to avoid interaction, relationships, healthy habits of life, and move into being secluded or go into one direction, you probably become more prone to having depression. So the young people who are listening to this, my only urge to you is, my advice to you is, there have been many pandemics in the world before. There was Spanish influenza in 1918. There was SARS, there was Ebola, there was MERS. All these pandemics have come and gone. The COVID has lasted for a much longer time. It has been more devastating. But this will go. It is not going to stay forever. So this too shall pass. It will move on, and life will come back one full circle. So you got to approach life from the perspective of a disease which has come and gripped us very tight, but it will loosen its grip, and we will have to move on. Okay. So life has got a lot of positive things that are beyond COVID, and you must look to that and be happy and cheerful, because there is a God who's controlling the world. It's not us who controls it, and He knows what He's doing. Okay, so this pandemic will blow over, and good times will return again, and we must look forward to that. and look at all the joyous things that await us, back to social life, back to a renewed relationship with nature and human beings, and that will energize our spirit and not push us into depression.